Why do I do this? Why do I go searching for the bad movies? Is it just to have more extra content for my channel? Is it to drive myself insane? Or maybe it's because I looked at the trailer and I thought, hey, this could be a fun B-movie horror film that's a little bit of a spoof, a little bit self-aware, and a little bit more of a parody. More so than the Bye Bye Man, that's for sure. But you know what? I think the Bye Bye Man is better than this movie. This movie might be crafted better than the Bye Bye Man. But I like the Bye Bye Man more, which isn't saying much. The Bad Kids of Crestview Academy. Now that's quite a mouthful because I've had to do that take several different times. Sometimes calling Crestview Crestwood. Sometimes calling Academy instead calling it High. I can get mixed up with titles. Anyway, this film is a spoof of horror films, particularly the teen slasher films. Well, mostly. And to be honest, it's kind of weird looking at IMDb and looking at what genres this movie is categorized in, because it's categorized as action, which kind of makes sense because the last act turned into a B action movie. It's also classified as comedy, which also makes sense because it's a spoof. But instead of horror, the third is adventure, I think. No, if anything, this is horror comedy, since they don't have spoof on IMDb, I don't think, as a possible genre. What is this movie about? Well, we have this teenager that goes to a very prestigious school. There's a lot of rich kids there, but there's also a lot of poor kids, so there's a bit of a class difference within this academy. It's not all that clear. I mean, no, it is clear, but it's not all that developed in this movie at all. There's a little bit of tension with class, but not much. But let's get back to the plot. The main girl of this film, her sister recently died, committed suicide, or so most people believe. She believes it's foul play. She believes someone murdered her. But she needs proof, and the only way to do that is to get into the school, hack into the school. So she gets someone to hack into the school, but she has to be there in person, so she has to get detention with all these other bad kids so she can sneak into the school, hack into the system, get the video file that her sister had taped during the night that she died, because apparently it didn't save on her phone, it just got sent straight to the school, and the only way to get those files is to hack into the school. Yeah, it's getting a little convoluted, isn't it? All the while, someone starts killing off these teens while they're in detention, and it might be the murderer that also killed her sister. It's actually pretty straightforward, but trying to explain that premise is actually, it just sounds confusing what I just said. Also, there's government conspiracy involved and crazy, crazy stuff. Like, really crazy stuff. Like cockroaches suddenly swarming and crawling all over the janitor. Yeah, that's in this movie. Okay, I've seen this movie 2 times now. I've regretted it, but I had to watch it again to refresh my memory in order to do this review. Now, the first time I watched it, there was something really off about it. There was something not quite hitting, and I was like, there's more prelude to this. There's something that this movie's not telling me. It almost feels like there's something I should know before going into this movie. And it's kind of weird that this movie starts off by showing a comic book called Kids Go to Hell, but with 2 as the number 2 rather than T-O. And I'm like, that's weird. Shouldn't the comic book, because we're diving into the comic book, and I'm like, shouldn't the comic book be called Bad Kids of Crestview Academy? Well, no, it's not, because the original title for this movie was supposed to be Bad Kids Go to Hell, because this is a sequel. Yeah, that's right. I didn't know this the first time going into it. Everything I looked up about the movie did not say it was a sequel. Know how I found out it was a sequel? After I saw the movie, I realized this was clearly a movie based off of a comic book or graphic novel. Because there's a lot of comic book imagery throughout this film we dive into a comic book at the start of the film, clearly it's based off of a graphic novel, and it says so in the opening credits. So instead of looking up the movie, I looked up the book. When I looked up the graphic novel, I found out that this was a sequel to another graphic novel. Then I realized there was a movie adaptation of that one, which is called Bad Kids Go to Hell. So the first movie is called Bad Kids Go to Hell, and the second movie is Bad Kids of Crestview Academy. And so I almost watched all of Bad Kids Go to Hell, and frankly, that is definitely the much better film. I never finished it. I was about 20 minutes from getting to the end, but clearly, for me, that was the better movie. This movie, it's flashy, it's more modern than the original one, and the original one was only in 2012. The 2012 Bad Kids Go to Hell looks like a 90s film, but honestly that 90s feel to it gave it its charm because it felt indie, it felt low budget, and it was trying to be a horror version of The Breakfast Club. So you might want to see that one before you see this movie. Just know the styles of these two movies are completely different. Essentially, both of them are the same movie, just one's a sequel, technically, just how sequels are sometimes the same as the first one, just with different characters. And there's a totally different style, and there's more smarts and more school drama and school drama conflict in the first one, while the second one's just batshit crazy. But anyway, enough about comparing those two, because I haven't actually fully seen Bad Kids Go to Hell. I just saw almost all of it. Like I said, I didn't see the last 20 minutes of it. What did I like about the Bad Kids of Crestview Academy? Well, it has style, I'll give it that. It's not a style that I liked, but it has style. It has a flash to it. And I think people that like really flashy, really teen-like movies might like this a little more. If they like their comic book adaptation movies to feel more like a comic book and to constantly turn into comic book form, then they might like this. When it comes to good acting, I feel there is only two people that I honestly thought did a pretty good performance. And honestly, they were the only two characters I pretty much cared about throughout the entirety of the film. That is the main girl, played by Sammy, I am going to butcher this last name. I think she did pretty well in the film, and she was a fairly good lead for the film. The other person I thought did a fine job was the main guy in the film, the one that seems like he's trying to be the main love interest, but he's got a bit of a really monotone sort of personality. And I think that was actually handled well. The kid's name is Kobe Arps. Anyway, I think he did a good job. I knew exactly where his character was going, so there was no twist for me. But I have to say, he did an okay job, and when he did become bad, it became so bad it's good. So he was entertaining nonetheless. I can see a bunch of people getting annoyed with him, though, because he is that monotone type character, and he has some of the strangest line deliveries I've heard in the entire film.
Sex. You and me. It's just a way to relax.
Are you shitting me? This was all some weird way to hit on me?
Maybe.
I'm not gonna fuck you just because I'm stressed.
Okay, fine, whatever, no worries. I'm really good, though.
Also, there are two cameos in this film. Sean Astin pops up as the headmaster in this film, and frickin' Drake Bell is a hacker called the Naked Wizard that is going to help her get into detention.
Excuse me, in my domain, you call me the Naked Wizard.
What?
Well, yeah, because nothing hides from my wizardry. Just like what's under your clothes.
I'd penetrate that.
Keep your dick habits to yourself.
Now, I honestly did like how they pieced together the murder mystery, or the potential suicide / murder mystery, where you get a little bit of everyone in detention's story and their perspective as you slowly piece everything together. So you get a little bit of one person's perspective, then as you get another person's perspective, you get a little bit more of the bigger picture, and it just eventually ties up and you realize the full extent by the end of the, well, you figure it out. I thought that was handled fairly well. It could get repetitive, but it added a little bit more each time we heard a different perspective. There was a bunch of different camera angles that tried to be vibrant, tried to be hip, and tried to be fresh, and I can appreciate the effort. And then by the end of the movie, by the time the third act happens, it just goes so crazy, so insane, it becomes a B-movie action film. And that's when it felt like it was striving for something a little bit better. Unfortunately, once it starts doing that, it becomes the end of the movie. But what I do like about the film is when you do realize who's killing off these bad kids in detention, and you look back at, okay, now how did that person do that? Honestly, the scripts and the twists and the things all make sense. It still didn't make it entertaining for me because there was enough bad things that I just ended up hating the film. But when it comes to plot holes, and it's like, well, if I look at it again, does this still make sense? And it does. Other than that, I pretty much hated the film. I mean, that sounds like a lot of good things, and a lot of major good things, but unfortunately all the bad for me just completely outweighs the good in this film. Okay, this is a horror movie spoof, and so it tries to make fun of your stereotypical teenage slasher film. And so, if you've never seen a spoof before, and you really hate teen slasher films, and just find that generic teenage slasher films is the funniest thing ever, then you might find this movie to be funny. If you've seen so many spoofs, or you like a lot of generic, or even better, teen slasher films, then you're going to find that this feels just like a generic teen slasher film. Because, in all honesty, it takes all the things, all the tropes and the cliches and the really generic things you'd expect from a teen slasher film, but doesn't really heighten it to exaggerated level, at least not until the end of the film when it becomes something completely different. And it never does anything really smart, I felt, to feel like it's being self-aware and to feel like it's being a true parody or a true spoof. It just feels like it's just hobbling a bunch of generic things together and say, hey, you know that thing that always happens in horror movies? Here you go. That's funny, right? But it never explores into the over-exaggeration or the funny aspects of why it's so funny. Instead, it just opts to do the really weird, which could be unintentionally funny, but for me, the entire film did not laugh a single bit, which is bad for a comedy, even though it is a spoof, but spoofs are comedies. So it wasn't funny enough to be a comedy, and it wasn't scary enough to be a horror film, and so it failed on both of those levels for me. Plus, a lot of the gore effects was pretty generic and pretty cheap looking and bad. I think there's only one gore effect that I kind of admired, but everything else was pretty bad. But at least the gore effects were a lot better than any of the visual effects in this movie. Holy crap, it looked cartoony as hell. And I know there's a lot of comedies that try to make visual effects look really cartoony because that could add to a comedic element of the special effects. But sometimes when I look at that in comedies, I just feel, that's just bad. It's not funny. It's just awful and painful to look at. Like, let me see if I can show a little bit of clips. Like, this one clip here, I'm not going to spoil how this person died or whatnot. It is the sister. It's the final part where you finally find the last piece on how the sister died. I'm not going to show the final moments of how this person who pushed her, or if she got pushed, or if she threw herself off the balcony. I'm just going to show you the fall itself because it doesn't give any spoilers because you know she dies anyway. And look at the visual effects of this fall. Okay? And if you thought that was bad, there's a moment where our main girl is driving. This is when it becomes a B action film. They almost do that kind of almost Fury Road type of zoom in on the dashboard. But it's not just Fury Road. There's a lot of B-movie action films, especially ones with drivers involved that I've seen this shot before. I just can't think of anything else other than Fury Road. After that, just look at the windows as she's driving and just tell me, does this look cartoony to you? The visuals are really bad, okay? And I think they're meant to be, but sometimes it's just not funny, it's just painful. And for me, it was just painful. And I couldn't even be surprised with twists. The one twist, when it turns into a totally different movie at the last third, I didn't see that coming, but I think I would have seen it coming if I had seen the first film, because apparently that was the twist of the first film. I saw the second one first, so I didn't know it was coming. But before that, the killer and who's responsible for all these teenagers dying and stuff in the academy, I knew right away from the first line a certain character uttered. I'm not going to reveal it, and I'm not going to say the twist yet. I'll save that until after the rating, just in case you don't want spoilers. I also, honestly, really didn't like the really flashy comic book style to this film. They would throw in these really badly looking cartoon comic book images whenever they introduced a character, and not any character, but whenever it was the bad kids that are going to detention, they had the same way they got out of the car, the same zoom in, and the same spots where comic book panels would show just what they've done. Like, there's no discovering the character and what they've done and how they're a bad kid as the movie progresses. No, they just show you right then and there what they've done and give them really ridiculous nicknames that relate to something that they're bad kids about. And then whenever there was a death in the movie, their corpse or their dying body would turn into a comic book cartoon and it would look horrible. Ultimately, if you don't have high expectations for a horror spoof movie, you might find this entertaining, and I think when it gets to the off-the-walls craziness, I think some people might enjoy that. So if this sounds like a movie for you, go ahead and try it. Just be warned, because personally, I really hated it. But I can see some people having a fun time, especially if they're a younger crowd and they like this kind of stuff. But I'm going to give the film 1 star. Now, as for the spoiler part, since now that we got the rating out of the way and you don't care about spoilers, this is the line that's uttered that just made me realize, yeah, this person's definitely the killer.
I'm glad I wasn't there the night it happened.
Were you even at your party? I didn't see you there.
Gotta stay squeaky clean for Mom's latest cafe.
Maybe it was me overthinking it. Maybe it was because I expect that sort of thing. But when you hear that this person was supposedly not even at the party while all the other people were accounted for, I was like, you know what? He's the guy. I'm sure they're thinking it's going to be a big twist. They're like, oh, he wasn't even at the party, so he's not even a suspect. Nope, he's suspect number 1. That's how movies work usually. And sure enough, he was. So, have you seen The Bad Kids of Crestview Academy? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2015, 2016, and hopefully more for 2017. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.